Welcome to Glory Days. I'm Nick Brooks, and today we're going to be talking cricket. In 1984, the West Indies arrived in England as the best side in world cricket. They were a fearsome outfit, a team of giants that contained dynamic batters, athletic fielders, and a three-pronged pace bowling attack that struck fear into the heart of anyone who'd ever held a bat. Garner, Holding and Marshall, a relentless battery who'd well earned a reputation for brutality and brilliance. Their results over the past decade spoke for themselves. After winning the World Cup in 1975 and 1979, the world had been shocked when they were upset in the final in 1983. As a test side, they were even more dominant. In 1976, Tony Greig promised to make them grovel, yet was forced to eat his words as the West Indies stormed into England and embarrassed his side. Heading into this series, they'd won 3 straight against Australia without losing a second innings wicket. You had to travel back almost 3 years to 1981 to find a loss on their record. This was the kind of team that doesn't come along every day. England entered the series on unsteadier footing. They'd endured a miserable winter, a first series loss to Pakistan, followed hot on the heels of the same against New Zealand, a trip which the media claimed was scuppered by drugs, heavy drinking, and sex romps. And the team was unsettled. Boycott had played his last test. Willis was into his 37th year. Some reckoned Botham and Gower were the only certainties. By the time the series was done, England had used 20 players, 5 of them debutants. Still, the press reckoned they had a chance. John Woodcock felt the West Indies should be entering their vulnerable phase. After all, he reasoned, Captain Clive Lloyd was fast approaching 40, while Richards, Garner, Greenwich and Holding were all past 30. Best days behind them, England were about to find out. For Warwickshire's opening batter Andy Lloyd, first days at school don't get much tougher. Gower won the toss at Edgbaston, and despite heavy cloud overhead, opted to bat. During his first half hour in an England cap, Lloyd saw his opening partner and number 3, Derek Randall, depart for ducks. Then it happened. Malcolm Marshall bowled a short ball which swung and cut back off the pitch. Lloyd thought he could sway inside it, but it followed him, rising sharply to strike him in the temple. The batter slumped to the ground. 80 yards away, safely ensconced behind 2 thick doors, the England players heard the crack. Though Lloyd bravely managed to walk to the boundary's edge, he'd be lain up in hospital for the next 9 days. Worse, he'd lost 35% of the vision in his right eye. As a cricketer, he'd never recover. It was a blood-curdling reminder that when you batted against these guys, you were protecting more than your wicket. Your life was in their hands. With Gomes and Richards making centuries, England were beaten by an innings and 180. In all likelihood, they could have batted a third time and not passed the visitors' score. It was an ominous start. For England fans, it felt like this would be a long and punishing summer. Yet often, it's the hope that kills you. The hosts were outstanding at Lords. 8 first innings wickets from Botham gave them a first innings lead. On the 5th morning, they declared 341 runs ahead. With 80 overs play left, only 2 results appeared possible: a draw or an England win. Surely a West Indies victory was out of the question. But Gordon Greenwich hadn't read the script. Time and again, he peppered the boundary rope square of the wicket, dismissing England's bowlers with a dazzling array of cuts and hooks and flicks. There was flourish in his strokes and swagger in his style. Once he passed 50, he abandoned his helmet in favour of the baggy maroon cap. One straight drive almost maimed the umpire. In the stands, West Indian fans danced and rang bells and blew conch shells. They flooded the field as Botham ended the match bowling off spin, a gesture which seemed to signal total capitulation. West Indies had gunned down the target in 66 overs for the loss of just 1 wicket. Greenwich became the 4th batter in Test history to make a 4th innings double hundred and the first in a successful chase. His second ton came at quicker than a run a ball. This was without doubt one of the greatest innings the game has seen, a dashing, daring knock which single-handedly turned the match on its head. But more than that, it drained the life out of England. After Lords, there was no coming back. The press whispered that the West Indies were working harder than their hosts, and the visitors seemed determined to repeatedly demonstrate the extent of their brilliance. At Headingley, Malcolm Marshall broke his thumb in 2 places fielding a ball at Gully and was told he'd need to rest for 10 days without cricket. You could forgive England's players for exchanging a smile or two. There wasn't a batter in the world who enjoyed facing Malcolm Marshall. But with the Windies 9 wickets down and Gomes stranded in his 90s, Marshall made the impromptu decision to change into his whites and pad up. The cast on his left wrist meant he could only hold the bat in one hand. With a bucket hat on his head and a broad smile on his face, Marshall stepped away and swatted at balls like he was on centre court at Wimbledon. His 8-ball stay included 1 boundary. More significantly, he helped Gomes reach his 100 and sent England a message. This West Indies side weren't schoolyard bullies. They were brave and dogged, determined to do whatever it took to win. Still, if seeing Marshall bat was a bit of fun, the sight of him warming up to bowl with one arm in plaster must have chilled the English to the very core. Incredibly, he returned his best figures to date in tests, 7 for 53, including a remarkable one-handed caught and bowled to get rid of Graham Fowler. England were 3-0 down by this stage, physically exhausted and psychologically shattered. Since no team could lay a glove on the West Indies, some journalists took solace in criticising the way they went about winning. Wisden spoke of the thuggery of the bouncer. There were many who'd have you believe that the battery of West Indies fast bowlers had reduced the game to bloody, boring, brutal target practice. In light of the bitterness, Old Trafford must have felt especially sweet. Greenwich struck his second double of the series when Winston Davis broke Paul Terry's arm with a sharp bouncer. Early in England's reply, there were no doubt tremors of outrage from the press box. But there's more than one way to skin a cat, and with England forced to follow on, the long-limbed, left-arm spinner Roger Harper took centre stage. He bowled with flight and guile and tore through England. For the second time that summer, the hosts lost by an innings and change. So it would come down to the Oval, where England would need something special to avoid being 5-0 at home for the first time in their history. It felt right that it should end here. Yes, this was a David and Goliath story. West Indies' brilliance made even more baffling by the fact its players were drawn from tiny islands with limited resources and infrastructure. But the clash was also imbued by the weight of history. For 300 years, the island had suffered through colonial subjection, their resources robbed, their people shackled and degraded. In the wake of the Second World War, Britain called for men of the empire to come to the motherland and help restore a faltering economy. They were promised streets paved with gold, yet arrived to a grey, gloomy city, as grim as it was unwelcoming. In the decades since, South London had become the spiritual home of Caribbeans in Britain, yet in the recent past it had been scarred by the Battle of Lewisham, the New Cross Fire and the Brixton riots. Being black and British in the 80s wasn't easy, so it was joyous to see West Indies fans flood into the Oval in their thousands. The 5th Test became an outpouring of Caribbean pride. No doubt, some traditionalists chafed at the carnival atmosphere, let alone the enduring wafts of ganja inside a cricket ground. But this was a celebration. As one reporter put it, these young people saw that West Indian cricket team as an expression of their frustrations. It was a solution. Still, day one didn't go according to plan. The West Indies needed a gritty 60 from Captain Lloyd to claw their way up to 190. But this team was like a boxer who comes back harder every time they've been buzzed. Marshall bowled with skill and spirit to secure a first innings lead. Haynes struck 100, and then Holding, reverting to the long, languid run-up of old, finished the job. West Indies 5, England 0. Surely the most iconic, enduring image of the summer was of dreadlock fans in the stand, proudly holding aloft a banner which read, Blackwash. 4 decades later, what remains is the potency of this West Indian side. Greenwich and Gomes led the charge with the bat, but Richards, Haynes and Dujon scored hundreds too, while Captain Lloyd averaged north of 50 and played crucial knocks whenever they were needed. Equally, with the ball, Garner and Marshall stole the headlines, bagging 29 and 24 wickets respectively, both at around 18. But Holding and Harper had their moments too. And when the backup cast was called upon, men like Milton Small, Wilton Davis and Eldine Baptiste slotted in seamlessly. And it's easy to forget how brilliantly the West Indies fielded, consistently making spectacular catches seem regulation. For anyone who loves cricket, 1984 will forever be associated with one of the greatest teams to play the game. Could any side, from any era, keep up with Lloyd's West Indies? Drop me a line and tell me your thoughts.